why people don't like Democrats and why they deserve it. This video series, podcast, whatever, is not designed for day to day reactions to the latest news, and there is a lot of it. So I'm going to touch on several points here that will inform my analysis of why Democrats can't be authentic and why they're basically cowards and why they're not winning in much larger proportions, which it seems like they should do because the Republicans are literally idiots at the leadership level, not at the people who vote for them level. There are a lot of people I admire who do the day-to-day outrage, and that is extremely important. The Bulwark, Pod Save America, Brian Cohen, Adam Mockler, Tennessee Brando, and many others. I will put a list of the shows I enjoy most in the show notes at some point. It's been a busy 10 days. Today is March the 29th, 2025. American agents are seizing people who are here legally on student visas for writing or co-writing an op-ed in a college newspaper, which is odd. Even worse, the American ICE agency has sent over 200 people to a mass torture prison in El Salvador without any due process. Gang members, they said, but at least a number of those people were here legally as asylum seekers, and it seems like most of what got them caught up was tattoos. There was a barber who was put on the plane because of a tattoo and the fact that he did a little horn sign online, supposedly gang. It's not. I know about gangs, and that's not a gang sign that I know of. There was a soccer player who had fled Venezuela for his life because he had protested against Maduro on the plane because of a tattoo. It was a soccer tattoo, I think, for Madrid. The point is, no due process. Some of these people had dates set up in the court system, and they were all, this is important to understand, they were all already detained in federal facilities or federally controlled facilities. And now they are in a mass torture prison in El Salvador. No due process. Why is that important? Anyone who's been in the system, and we'll touch on this later, knows it is important. Because once you are in the system, understand me, unless you can get in front of a judge, you are at the mercy of the system. There's no other way to describe it. Until you get in front of a judge, you're just in the system, and that's it. So these people were sent to El Salvador, to a prison that has like a 30 to 40,000 population rate. It's rated as, basically a torture prison. For how long? Why were they sent there? They were already detained in federal facilities. Why were they sent to El Salvador? Anyway, no due process. What if a citizen was in there? He looked Hispanic. His grandpa was from Venezuela. He had tattoos. It's just indefensible. Now, the other big scandal is, of course, the Secretary of Defense, the head of the CIA, the head of the Department of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, the vice president, numerous other people were on a chat where Jeff Goldberg had also been accidentally invited into the chat. He's the editor of The Atlantic, which is a very good magazine. The scandal was not the reporter was accidentally invited into the group chat. The scandal was that these people were discussing highly classified compartmentalized information on departure times of military flights, weapons packages, and specific aircraft and drones that were going to be used in the operation. On an app, keep this in mind, they were doing this on an app on their personal phones. The app was called Signal, that anyone can download on their phone. And the fact that they were using their personal phones in this group chat is a gigantic breach of security in every way. If it wasn't the leaders that did this, but second echelon commanders within the military, they would be fired and facing criminal charges as I speak. Okay, so all this will end up in the discussion I have planned for today about the Democratic Party and why it is important for people to understand this aspect of history. Because unless major changes are made in the Democratic Party, Trump and MAGA will continue to win. Now, I'm not a fan of the Democrats. I haven't been a fan of the Democrats for many decades. I haven't come upon this lately. These are things that have been festering problems, and they're one of the reasons why Democrats were feckless and easily defeated by a buffoon and a con man who said out loud that he wanted to, do away with the American principles of justice and freedom and equality. And the Democrats were just like, whatever. So they lost, and now we got Trump as president. So there used to be a word that was popular in the 80s and 90s, deriding people as being without moral clarity or courage of any sort. I never liked that word, even back in the day. It was related to cat. There was one before that, though. Actually, more than one. I've read a lot of westerns when I was younger. Louis L'Amour was very popular with me. He wrote some great westerns, some of them being made into movies, which aren't as good as the books. He understood that people could be flawed and still be good people and still make righteous decisions. This was courage and doing the right thing. Standing up for those that are weaker than you. Treating everyone the same. That also very neatly describes what the Democrats haven't done for the last 35 years. As a party, and specifically the party leadership, on nearly every major issue, they have triangulated and calculated the best outcome for themselves, and they have shifted their constituency from the working people. Most of us, I live paycheck to paycheck. As you can probably see, I live in a whole rundown double wide. But they have shifted their constituency from the working people, which they held through the 1970s, to Wall Street and corporate interests over the decades. Starting in the mid-1980s, 1990s. So, in the old literature, the Western literature, people that purposefully chose to abandon their ideals were branded with among the worst epithets, and often deservedly so. Coward, yellow belly, turncoat, backstabber. All of these words describe the bulk of the Democratic Party leadership. Not Democrats or people who identify with the Democratic Party, but the leadership. Especially the leadership of the Senate Democrats. These same words also describe the Republican Party for different reasons. I'm not going to talk about this tonight. The leadership of the Democratic Party has been doing the work of cowards for decades. ignoring issues that should have been glaring. Not just ignoring, but purposely not taking a stand to defend people who were their stated constituents. So now that the time has come where they actually need to go to the mats and get in a life or death fight over what America means at its basic core, what does it mean? I'm a kind of a country dude who thinks about stuff, politics, philosophy. What does America mean at its core? What are conservative principles? What are liberal principles? What are American principles? You judge each person on how they treat others and whether they keep their word, right? If someone's done something wrong, you want proof of it. The jury system. If 12 people can't convict a guy, then there's a reason he shouldn't be convicted. You want to treat everybody the same. I don't want to single out a person I don't like because of this or because of that. When it comes to the way I treat people, I want to treat everyone the same. I expect people to keep their words, and I expect them to be honest. And most people are. Some aren't. You know, what are you going to do? Yeah, to me, that's what it means to be American. Treat everybody equally. Judge people on the way you interact with them, and not what somebody says about them when you've never met that person. And those are American values to me. They should be embraced by conservatives, liberals, and anyone else. Now, when faced with an actual test, what did the Democratic leadership do? Did they stand up for those principles, which are foundational core principles? No. They capitulated. Hakeem Jeffries did a good job of the Democrats in the House. But Schumer stabbed the American people in the back because him and his other flunkies were cowards. We'll come back to the current situation in a minute. First, let me try to explain my disdain for the Democratic Party using a few examples, all of them originating after the Democratic defeats of the 1980s under Reagan and Bush 1. Democrats have made a good show of talking about liberal or progressive goals, and in my view has always been nothing but talk. Since the Clintons gained control of the party and that whole corporate wing of the Democratic Party. It wasn't just the Clintons. They're not the evil masterminds, but they were emblematic of the problem that was gripping the Democratic Party in the 1990s. Not in any conspiratorial way, just in the triangulated doublespeak that Democratic politicians and the Democratic Party adopted and then polished over the years, that so they could continue to pretend to be what they weren't. A party that cared for the people, the vast bulk of the people of the United States. When, in fact, they had become a party that cared for the people on Wall Street and corporations. The most obvious of this was, of course, the Greenspan approval to head the economy by Clinton, and then Clinton appointing Greenspan yet one more time in 1996. By that point, they were in the beginnings of the no interest, no regulation cycle that would carry through Clinton, Bush 2, and even extend into Obama's reign in 2008 during the financial crisis that Greenspan's economic theories had caused. This cycle caused multiple crashes and near misses and resulted in the 2008 financial meltdown, what was blamed by some on the housing market. But what did Obama do? Well, he didn't appoint Greenspan because by that point Greenspan was retired. But he appointed Greenspan's hand-picked team, Bernanke, Summers, and their ilk. They made sure the banks got theirs in the 2008 crisis. But at the individual level, very little happened for the people that had actually been taken advantage of during the past 8 to 10 years. So the Democrats capitulated on any meaningful reform. They did not make whole the people that had been taken advantage of, did not force new leadership of the institutions that caused the crash or the outlook which caused it, rammed through some largely meaningless restrictions on banks and Wall Street, and what did the actual people get? Sure, there were some concessions along the way, the biggest being Obamacare, or is actually known the ACA. This helped out a lot of people. But in the end, it was just another health insurance regulation recycled from a 1990s plan by the Republicans. And we got the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is actually a very good thing, and which is now being dismantled by the Trump administration. The Bureau's sole purpose was to make sure people were being fairly treated by large players and corporations. That's it, though. The American people got insurance regulation and one government bureau that was trying to fight against corporate greed. And now Wall Street stocks are over 40K. The difference between top earners and average is larger than ever. For decades, the Democratic Party kowtowed to the same people that Republican Party did. The money people. It wasn't a question of who was going to lower taxes, because they were both going to lower taxes. It was a question of who was going to lower taxes slightly more. Right? Social issues. Abortion, homosexuality. Whoever would have thought that there would be a Supreme Court that would overturn Roe v. Wade in the 1990s and the early 2000s and the mid 2000s? No Democrats thought that was going to happen. So they just coasted along. What else did they coast along with? The second big thing is the drug war. It is easier than ever to say, oh, look around. You know, you can buy weed in most states. But in the last century, marijuana was legal nowhere, and the so-called Liberal Party was the one leading the charge for longer prison sentences, mandatory minimum sentences, 3 strikes and you're out charges, the outrageous add-ons to crack cocaine, and more. On a federal level, marijuana is still a Class A substance akin to coke and heroin. The Democratic Party had gigantic chances to change this in many different ways and at many different times, and it should have been the first thing Biden did when he was elected in 2020. Understand this. People are serving hard time in federal prison for marijuana. And in pretty much every state of the union, people are also buying marijuana legally now. thanks to states pushing it through or the recent Farm Bill. But there are still people in prison for nothing more than marijuana. Dealers, to be sure, but people who don't have any other crimes in their jacket, if you will. For what? A plant. This year so far, according to drugsense.org, we have spent over $3 billion at the federal level and over $6 billion at the state level on the drug war. Nearly 250,000 people already have been arrested just for marijuana this year, despite the fact that it was widely attainable through legal means. And the drug war itself, it gives criminals an advantage. It gives criminals the entire regulatory framework. It gives government and law enforcement tools to use the drug war against specific individuals or whole communities. That's the important one. It gives law enforcement an edge, a finger into any community, because every community uses drugs. Not every person does, but in any community, you're going to have a percentage of that community who use drugs, and a percentage of that is going to use illegal drugs. And as long as drugs are illegal, that allows the police to go into those communities in a predatory fashion and view those communities as enemies. That would not exist if the drug war ceased. That's what the drug war does. It pits the police against communities, often of color, or poor communities. It happens in Appalachia too, where the communities are majority white. And they're still preyed upon by the police. Arrested for ridiculous charges. You know, this has been known for decades. What's also been known is that the drug war is one of the major causes of our modern immigration problem, because of the corruption that it has spawned to countries to the south of us. Mexico, Central America, and South American countries have all been exposed to the insane profits that drug gangs can garner from cocaine and heroin and other designer drugs. And it's totally unregulated. And it is totally unregulated because we refuse to regulate it. That's why drug gangs exist. We are going to use drugs one way or the other. Now, we cry about illegal immigration now, but we've been systematically making these countries bad places to live since the 1950s, since the end of the World War II. We have interfered with their economies, and one of the biggest ways we've interfered with their economies is by our drug war. We have forced the countries to sign treaties with us, saying they'll support us in the war on drugs, when everybody knows that the cartels are making more money than the government's making. So, how do you think that's going to go? It's going to go the same the next 20 years as it has the last 20 years. When there's something illegal that people want, just like back in Prohibition, there's going to be people willing to do it. And if you don't regulate that thing, then criminals will be the one regulating it. There's no other way around it. Zero. That's all there is to it. So, at the end, Biden gave a wink and a nod that maybe marijuana should be taken off the federal prohibition list in the last months before the election. That's not just cowardice. That's craven, in my view, and incredibly stupid. It just points out the fact that the Democratic Party has known about this problem for decades, and they've just let people rot away in prison or be hassled by law enforcement through their whole lives because they got busted for marijuana a couple of times when they were younger. The Democratic Party that let that happen should be ashamed of itself. And, that's just another example of the fact that their actual constituency are not working people who have to worry about the drug war. Their constituency is Wall Street and rich folks who don't have to worry about the drug war, because if they get caught or their kids get caught with drugs, guess what? They can afford a really good lawyer who's going to get them off, maybe some probation, very little time involved at that level. So, people have mistakenly thought that the constituency of the Democratic Party was working people. I felt like that was abandoned in the late 1970s after Jimmy Carter was defeated. They began a conscious turn towards the wealthy and Wall Street, bankers, and here we are today. That's why the Democratic Party is feckless. That's why they can't be authentic, because they still pretend they're for the working people, and some of the new ones are. Some of the new ones are very good, but they're still a very, very, very small minority compared with the amount of Democratic politicians who for years have had the chance to actually change things, or even just to bring it up in a conversation. Bernie has done that. He's like one lone voice in the wilderness. If you look back through the 90s, he's like, why are drugs illegal? It's a giant anchor on the economy. It's damaged the countries to the south of us. It's a main driver of illegal immigration from the south of us today. It's weakened our borders. It's made our police forces corrupt. And the Democrats have just watched it happen, knowing that it was doing these things. And now, I thought, okay, they'll finally stand up. They'll finally start fighting. Because now it really matters. Like it didn't matter before. Boy, I was wrong. Schumer caved faster than a wet paper bag. He's a coward. He's a rat. He can say, oh, it would have been playing into Trump's hands if the government shut down. Well, you conceded a lot of stuff on that CR, Schumer. I mean, you didn't just do a continuing resolution. You helped pass what's going to be a new bill that has a bunch of bad stuff. And then, over the weekend, Trump started deporting people without due process to South American torture prisons. He had a cabinet-level meeting on a common phone app that's highly illegal, giving away classified information, and they accidentally invited a reporter into the meeting. So this is what you got for capitulating, Schumer. Or I guess, people that think from Schumer's point of view. You should have shut the government down. You should have been merciless. You should have fought. But you're not used to fighting. You're used to doing things for your true constituency, which is rich people in Wall Street. Shutting the government down doesn't equate into that. If this doesn't change, if the Democratic Party doesn't have a radical change in the leadership position, then they're going to get defeated again and again and again, and things are going to get worse and worse. So the sooner the Democrats come to their senses and start demanding more of their politicians, the sooner we can be ready for when Trump crashes our economy and somebody has to step in with an actual plan to fix things. And I pray to God that the Democratic Party is up to it, because if they're not, it's another, that's just like getting behind Trump. If we keep the same leadership, then we're voting for Trump and MAGA to do whatever they want to do. The way I see it. Anyway, I'm Andy of the True Conservative in North Carolina. Y'all have a great day.